Hello and welcome to another episode of Jakub's House of Rock. And today, well, I'm sorry that this episode's coming a little late actually because I have some internet trouble and all that, blah blah blah. And I'm sorry, I know a lot of you people are probably waiting on my more of my guitar stuff, more of my guitar tech type videos. But today I'm gonna try out something new, a little series that I've been thinking about doing for a little while, and I think now's a good time to put in the first episode. So today is going to be the first episode of my album reviews series. So I'm going to be chucking one of these episodes in every once in a while, you know, so yeah, just there'll be a playlist for this one. And since today I wanted to start off with a very special album, and I kind of wanted to build to some other albums, so I'm thinking about just reviewing all the Black Sabbath albums, because, you know, big Black Sabbath fan. Black Sabbath's one of my favorite bands of all time, might even be my favorite band. I toss up Black Sabbath and Yes quite a lot, so it's hard to choose, and, you know, some other bands in there like Psy and some other stuff I'm really big fan of, but for now, we're going to be reviewing the Black Sabbath albums, and I got the idea to do this sort of album review series because I was listening to Technical Ecstasy the other day, and I'm like, you know what, this is a good album. I feel like I could, because it's one of those ones where people kind of like don't really talk about it. It's one of those ones that's generally considered not as good or something. But then I was listening to it, I'm like, you know, this is some good songs. I could talk about this. But I didn't want to just start off with Technical Ecstasy, you know, like the I don't even know what it is, like the 7th or the 8th Sabbath album. So I'm gonna get to that one in a long time though, but we'll get there. But I figured it would be worth starting off from number one, the very classic album, Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. So here I've just got the CD of it. Sorry, I'm not doing vinyls. They're all at my dad's place. So I don't even have that many Black Sabbath vinyls, unfortunately. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to be doing CDs. So, not that it really matters. So this album was released in 1970, I believe. It was, you know, I think it was recorded just in late 69 or something like that. Let's just go through some history, because it's kind of necessary with this album, and some context about the time especially. So basically, just before I get into that, I'll let you know how I see these album reviews sort of going. So I kind of see it as, first I'll start off, you know, doing some context and a little talk about the album. Then we're going to go through each track. I'll play like 3 seconds or something, or like 10 seconds of each track, and then I'll talk about it for a bit, and then I'll do a conclusion. I don't know how long is the YouTube like limit to how long you can play a bit of a track before it starts to go under the copyright thing, so I'll look into that, and then I'll play as much as I can of each track for you guys. But you know, hopefully you guys would have already heard the album, so you know what I'm talking about. If not, just pause this video, listen to this whole album. It's very much worth it. But here we go. So Black Sabbath sort of originated in Birmingham, which is, you know, the very industrial town in Britain, sorry. Very industrial town, very grim sort of a place, you know, factories and like just not a nice sort of place to live. So the vibe they had there was very much contradictory to the music that was around at the time. You know, there was like the Beatles, all the like sort of flower power stuff going on, all the hippie bands, because again, they started out in the late 60s, and originally they actually formed as a group called Earth. They were a blues jazz group called Earth. You know, they go around playing a lot of the blues jazz clubs and stuff like that. Till eventually they stumbled upon this little thing called heavy metal. The story behind the sort of origin of the heavy Sabbath sound goes as follows. Tony Iommi, the guitarist, had an accident in which he's left-handed, so it was on his right hand, I think. It was, these fingers were basically, he got his fingers chopped off, the tips of his fingers chopped off in a factory accident on his last day. He didn't even have to fill in that shift, but he did, and yeah. So that happened. He was, discouraged and all sad. And I think like his tour manager or something like gave him some Django Reinhardt records, and he's a very famous jazz guitarist who also had like played with, I think he only had like two fingers or something on one hand, so that kind of encouraged him to keep playing. And the way he sort of did it was he had like these special little finger things that made of like melted plastic with like little bits of leather on the tips of his fingers just to help him play. And from that originated his down tuning, his sound, where he tuned down his guitar and to make it easier to play, so you can get those really big bends in there, and just gave the characteristic of the guitar just a whole different sound, a very unique sound to Tony Iommi, which is something we're looking at on my other series, where I'm actually looking at a bunch of sort of different guitars and like different products and pickups and pedals and stuff like that to get you that Black Sabbathy sound. Shameless self-promotion right there, guys. But yeah, so that's sort of where his guitar sound originated. But then they were big horror movie fans, and one day they there was a Boris Karloff film called Black Sabbath came out, so I think they went to watch that, and that's where the sort of name originated. And so then we get to sort of the origin of the song Black Sabbath, which we're gonna explore in a second. But basically, that was the precursor to all heavy metal, pretty much. Like, especially this whole album was really like Paranoid a bit more so than this one, but this one was, again, like Paranoid would not have existed without this album. It's a bit glary, sorry guys. Don't fall, please. So they were big horror movie fans, and Geezer Butler, the bass player, he does pretty much all the lyrics in the band. So Ozzy Osbourne sings. Ozzy Osbourne always did sort of the vocal melodies was his thing. He'd like make up words, not words, but like make up songs that probably weren't very good, but the melodies that he added to them, the way they meshed with the actual the riffs and the rhythms and all that was really, really down to Ozzy, coming up with all that. But the actual sort of words and the lyrics and all that sort of stuff generally came, at least in the Ozzy era of Black Sabbath, because we're going to get to that Dio era in a couple of episodes. But for now, we're just sticking to the Ozzy era. So you had Geezer Butler, so he was the lyricist basically for the band for most of the Ozzy era, and he was into all this weird cult stuff, and at one night he actually had some experience. I don't know if it was a drug-induced hallucination or a dream or something, or if Satan really did appear, but one night he woke up in the middle of the night and there was a black figure at the foot of his bed. And from this experience, they came up with the lyrics to Black Sabbath. And where the main riff sort of came from was actually inspired by Gustav Holst, which is a British composer known for the Planet Suits. So in particular, Geezer Butler was practicing one day. He was just trying to figure out the how to play Mars, which is Mars, the Bringer of War, is a piece by Gustav Holst. Very good, by the way. Check that one out. And Jupiter, Bringer of Jolly. Both are very, very good pieces of music. But that's where that heavy sort of, what is it called? Dissonant fifth or third, or, the Devil's Triad sort of sound came out of, where it was like a very dark sounding three notes together. So Tony Iommi heard this, and that's where he was inspired to write the riff to Black Sabbath, and all these elements sort of came together, I'm also kind of, I haven't talked about Bill Ward yet, but we're definitely going to get into him in this this album review, because his drumming, very jazzy, very vibrant, very, it's top notch. It really fits with the music. But um, basically all these elements came together and they formed this really sort of dark song that we're about to explore, called Black Sabbath. And from this, sort of the whole direction of the band basically evolved. So in this album is basically, I well, I'll get to this more later on, but basically, sort of the way I'm going to sum up this album is like, I feel there's no album that really sounds the same as this one. It's very unique sounding. It's really Black Sabbathy, really Black Sabbathy, but it's unlike any of their other albums. But it's, you can really sort of hear their influences, you can hear their style, and it's really separate from, because it's very bluesy, it's very jazzy, and it's very heavy, but it doesn't sound like any other blues, jazz, or heavy band out there. So I feel like this album's probably gonna be a little bit, if you're like a conventional sort of heavy metal fan, it might not meld well for you. If you're a conventional sort of blues fan, it might not meld well for you. And if you're a conventional jazz fan, it might not meld well for you, basically. So, but I feel like this is going to be like an either you love it or hate it kind of an album. But with that said, let's get to the title track. Oh, I will also mention, actually, sorry, I keep rambling on. This is going to be something that happens a lot in these videos. I'm sorry. But this whole album, because they've been, touring this thing a lot, playing in lots of clubs all over England or over Birmingham at the very least, for a long time, they were so good they got these songs so together by the time they went to record it, that I think well, the rumor I heard is they recorded the whole thing in about 2 days over the course of, I don't know whether it was whether it was 8 hours, or in total, or 8 hours over each day, but I think it was, yeah, 4 hours on each day, plus, and then it was, mixed, but the actual recording was just those 8 hours. So very quickly put together album, but very solid. So let's get into it. Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, from the album Black Sabbath. Very interesting song there. So basically, I really love the sort of intro to this thing. How it starts off with the thunder and that bell tolling, the church bell sort of in the background. This whole song is really about atmosphere, especially the first big chunk of it, where it's really just that riff, the dun, 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 and the sort of variants that they do about do during that, and the whole lyrics and the tone, and from the moment, like, all the instruments come in there, you really get a sense of how this album's really gonna sound. There's all these, like, especially with the drums, you hear all the sort of echoes of them in the nice space. There's a beautifully done stereo effect, a lot of those effects on this album. What I really love is when albums do have a really good spacing of the stereo field, and you can hear echoes in the right areas, and it really has a spacious sort of feel, and that works really well with atmospheric stuff like this song, because yeah, that whole intro of the thunder and the lightning and the rain, it sets you in this mood. And so when this sort of dark riff comes in, and it is very dark, like the sounds meld well together, and it's really beautifully done. A common complaint of this song is that bit goes on a bit too long, but I think it's definitely necessary, because when that that galloping sort of rhythm comes in, that and like, that's sort of my favorite part, when you just have all this build, and then it finally just, in this like really epic sort of solo at the end, builds up and is just this release from all that. And it's really one of those songs that's like, it's not like one of those songs that you put on and you like instantly headbang. It's one of these sort of atmospheric songs that really builds. And I think that's what grabbed a lot of people's attention. I feel that, you know, the first heavy metal song, or the, you know, at least like one of the most influential songs on the genre of heavy metal, uh, does need to be one that sort of doesn't scare people away in the same way as if like in 1969, if like a thrash song had come out, everybody would like, oh god, what the hell, and like people would have instantly sort of dismissed it. But this kind of thing just comes out and people are like, whoa, what's that? And that's kind of why I think this song is so influential, because like when they played it in these clubs, like it would have drawn attention to people, because like this sort of thing had not been heard before. It's very cinematic, very eerie, and it sort of builds and builds and builds, so it doesn't have like one immediate point where people would like reject it, even though I did hear that people would literally run out of, like, leave the clubs because of this song. But yeah, that's Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. So yeah, it sounds very different to pretty much any Black Sabbath song, except for you know, End of the Beginning on 13. But that's just because a lot of these songs were blatant copies of some of the early ones, capturing the vibe, which I love this album though. Aside from some of the production, the actual songs on this album are top notch. But we'll get to that one in a long time, because there's a lot of Black Sabbath albums, which I'm very happy about. Now, next song, The Wizard. So, that one's a very interesting song too. This one is the first one where we get like that full-on sort of riffing going on, and like the really good melding of Geezer's bass lines with Tony's just riffs. And this one kicks off really cool. It kicks off with a lot of harmonica actually, so it's actually quite fitting, I think, because unlike some other lyrics that got sort of into the, you know, very anti-war sort of stuff, you know, and all this stuff about Vietnam and drugs and the, you know, demonicness and stuff like that, and like the first one, the first song here, we get one that's about Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings. So kind of like we got some songs from Led Zeppelin about you know, that had a lot of Tolkien references. This is the one that we get from Black Sabbath, and it is a really groovy song. This song also has like the first sort of long, like, I know that, well, the first song had a long intro, but that one, that song wasn't structured in the same way as a lot of sort of typical Black Sabbathy songs are. This song is like, you know, it's got that sort of long intro that has the and it's got you know, and then it like kicks off into like the dark sort of sort of heavy vibed bit. And when it does that, that's sort of when the intro ends, even though the intro kind of comes back as a chorus later on. But it's really cool, because I love songs with like long intros actually, and Black Sabbath have some really good ones. Like when we get to Into the Void later on in this series, I'm gonna be like all over that one, excited, because I love that one. Very, very good intro. But this is like sort of the start of it, and everyone's really, really on point in this one. Like the drumming is very groovy. Just the fills in here are just perfectly sort of melded throughout, and like I said, the way the bass and the guitar sort of bounce off each other is really nice, and even Ozzy's harmonica playing is really top notch. So it's just a fun song, and like I'm kind of sad that they don't really have any like much harmonica. Like I think after this album they kind of ditch it for the most part in the later albums, which is sad, because Ozzy did a really great job on this one. You Another thing you kind of notice as we go through this album is that Ozzy's vocals aren't as yet using his sort of his famous sort of high pitch voice, which we get in later albums. But the way he delivers his vocals is very raw, but very unique still, which is why Ozzy is one of my favorite singers, because nobody really sounds like him. I mean, there's a couple of bands now that have, like, if you listen to Orchid, the guy from there is pretty much copying Ozzy as close as humanly possible, and there are some other sort of Sabbathy bands, but just going on, especially for the time and for many decades actually afterwards, nobody really sounded like Ozzy unless they were directly imitating him, because he had a very unique sound. It's kind of like somebody trying to be Bob Dylan or something like that. He, it's a very specific sort of vocal style. And yeah, the guitar tone on this was also monstrous. Like when we got that wow wow, wow wow, it's got that really nice sort of meshing of like a fuzzy distortion where it's not quite fuzz and it's not quite distortion, but it's a really good mix. And that's something that I really love about his sound. And just, yeah, beautifully done song. I love The Wizard. I think it's a very underrated song. So let's go to track number 3 on Black Sabbath, which is Behind the Walls. Behind the Wall of Sleep. Ooh, I love this song. This one is, this one's, it's sort of something similar to what you would sort of get maybe later, like maybe on Sabbath 4 kind of vibes in places, but not really. This one's again got that really cool intro to it, which does make a reprise later in the song, but I really love the transition where you got this really open sort of intro, and then the drumming gets real, like the instruments sort of sit back for like a bar or two, and then the drumming kind of gets in there, and it's really groovy. It's like really funky actually. The drums are just the groove that it's got going in this song is really top notch. Bill Ward did fantastically on some of these songs here. I'm gonna bring up 13 again because I love this album, but they got Brad Wilk to do the drumming on this song because they had some issues with getting Bill Ward to go on it, unfortunately, and same with the tour, he wasn't there as well. And it people were like, ooh, Brad Wilk, he's gonna do all this sort of cool sort of drumming that's gonna be kind of like Bill Ward's-ish, because Bill Ward and Brad Wilk kind of had this interesting thing going where they had like really sort of unique sounding drums, but then it was kind of played down on this album, unfortunately. But this is just a really great example of how Bill Ward could lay down just such a simple groove, but just make it so poignant, and just really liven up the whole song. And just the timing of everything on this song is really well done. Like the way the instruments are spaced out, that you've got the drums going for a bit, then the bass, and then like the guitar answering that, and all this sort of stuff. And speaking of the bass, really good sound bass on this one. Again, it sounds like no other Black Sabbath album quite has this sort of just this mood and this vibe that these songs do. And this, sort of the sound of the bass is a big part of that. It's also, as a bass player myself, bass and guitar, but I give bass just as much credit as I do guitar, and I think it's a very underrated instrument. So to see like these really nice active bass lines going on during the solos, and the way it interacts with the guitar here and the drums is really nice. Also, there's some interesting stuff going on with Ozzy's vocals being double-tracked here, so you can hear a different take in either ear to give like a really thick sort of vocal sound. Sort of interesting take on that. Could have been done a little more cleanly, I guess, but it really sort of works with the vibe of this song, I feel. And yeah, just another very underrated song, I'd say. Again, I really love the intro to this song. It just really gets you into it, and then it pulls you into this funky rhythm that I absolutely love. So, Behind the Walls of Sleep is phenomenal. It's also a very sort of very short song, I'd say, and kind of simple in its own way. The solo is nothing like it's one of those solos where the specific solo could, like, I could picture it in a live version being more improvised and changed up, whereas some songs like Paranoid, the solo is like note for note, like iconic. So the solo is sort of meh, but the riff and the rhythms in this are top notch. N.I.B. Oh yeah. First of all, this song kicks off with one of my favorite bass solos of all time. If you'd listen to any of my other sort of you know, any of my other bass-related videos on my channel, I always play sort of a little version of it. On my sort of demoing parts in those videos. So I love this little bass solo. It's also got some cool wah effect on it, and you know, you very rarely get to see like a bass solo come out on an album. And Geezer Butler, being the monster of a bass player that he is, I'm really glad that he got this one. And I got to see it played live twice in my life, which was really awesome. This track is actually this one and the first song, Black Sabbath, are actually the two that really are sort of in the live concerts. They come up a lot because the two from this album that really sort of people gravitated to, I feel, and are the most sort of accepted by people. So this track is really the one that even people who don't really enjoy this album for various reasons compared to other Black Sabbath albums, this track is the one that, you know, just because it's so damn catchy, you really have to love it. It's kind of the track you just gotta love. And I mean, they did like a version of it, like I was saying, on 13, where it's Loner, which I love. Loner, it's like my second favorite song on 13. Pariah is my first, by the way, which I don't know why it's a bonus track, because it should be like in the but yeah, this song's really good. Like the riff is just so infectious. So love that riff, love the whole rhythm of this song as well. Tony Iommi's solos in this are great. I love the soloing he does. There's some really cool double tracking that you hear on this in this solo. There's a lot of sort of guitar double tracking in this album too, where I think the only things they double tracked were some, you know, like I said, the vocals of Ozzy and some of Tony's playing. But he's really good at actually playing. Doing like different melodies over his other melodies and having them panned left and right, and it's just this cool, really playful sounding thing, and you get those really cool bends from him, and like during the solo, the riff, he does the sort of like that sort of like really cool vibrato tap-on effect really well, and some just awesome bends in there, which is just really sort of an iconic part of his sound. So very good playing from Mr. Ozzy Osbourne there. And now getting into the lyrics here, it's basically a love song. It's basically the devil singing a love song. So basically, like, you know, like look into my eyes, you'll see who I am. My name is Lucifer, please take my hand. You know, you just got these pardon my horrible singing there, but you just got these really great lyrics that it's just like, it doesn't have like any of those sort of more political themes or whatever, or any of that sort of stuff that you hear in other songs like War Pigs and all of that sort of stuff, and that you get a lot on the next album, or in some later songs on this album, which we'll be sing in a second. But just the creativity of these lyrics and the actual way that it's phrased is just really, I love it. Beautifully done. Well, great singing by Ozzy too. It's just a really solid song, really fun. love N.I.B. And the funny thing is, people think that this song is called Nativity in Black because N.I.B, but the actual, they didn't know what to call this song. So just because at the time Bill Ward had like this sort of pointy little goatee beard, one day Ozzy just looked at him. Probably he was probably drunk or something. He was like, "You look like a pen nib," and so so that's where the story behind the name comes from. So N.I.B, a really good song, really fun. Not a serious song or anything like that, but it's definitely worth a good listen. So our next, so that was number 4. So number 5 is Evil Woman. So we're getting to, I think, I'm not sure how this album was divided up on like the vinyls, but I think Evil Woman would have been the first on side 2, or maybe N.I.B was. I don't know. Black Sabbath is a pretty long song, and so is The Warning, which would have been on side 2. So I'm guessing that side 2, because The Warning's really long, would have had some shorter songs to start it off with. So Evil Woman. Let's go into that one. Okay, so Evil Woman. This is one of at least 2 cautionary tales sort of type songs that Black Sabbath has about single mother. So, which is funny because then there's the Lady Evil by Black Sabbath during the Dio era songs, which is kind of a similar song, but very different sounding song, but lyrically very similar. First of all, this song kicks off with a really good bass tone, just really, really nice, and just lots of little cool bass licks throughout here. Just love that sound that Geezer's got going in this one. This whole song is very uncharacteristic of Black Sabbath again. This one's more of a rhythm and blues type feel. Like, in fact, even the guitar on this, for the most part, like the dun that I can picture that totally being played on like brass instruments as opposed to a guitar, and just being like this sort of really swinging kind of like a rhythm and blues track, which I really love. Yeah, there's some really cool, speaking of the guitar, there's some lovely sort of dirty bluesy type little licks through here. I wouldn't quite call them solos, but they're like, like mini solos where they just kind of like really sort of dig in there, and fantastic sound there. Even though, like I was saying, this is like cautionary tale against single mothers, it's more of like against sort of like a wicked woman that's trying to be very seducing. But there's some really cool sort of lyrical phrasing in here, like your body moves just like the crack of a whip. Ozzy does it a lot better than I do, the singing here, but he just got these beautiful sort of lyrical phrasing that just really stays with you, and I love this sort of stuff that Black Sabbath have going, and Ozzy pulls off so well. So very well sort of written, really sort of simple, groovy, kind of like a rhythm and blues track. So Evil Woman. Okay, what have we got next? I'm really enjoying going through this album, actually. Sleeping Village. This is gonna be an interesting one. Let's get to Sleeping Village. In the trees, peace of mind. Okay, so Sleeping Village. This it's a very this is more of like a a prologue. Is it epilogue or prologue? The one that comes first to The Warning. This is like it's like basically a number of sort of, there's like 3 or 4 different motifs sort of put together. It's got this like intro, which is like this really sort of eerie intro where it's this acoustic little piece playing in this weird like creepy springy sound, and Ozzy sort of singing, and then it goes into like 2 different changes of 2 or 3 different changes of sort of song bits, and then it goes into like this really crazy solo. And there are some cool little moments in here. So apart from that little intro bit, it's just instrumental. A very short little piece. Actually, how long is it? Oh, actually, it's not actually, It's almost 4 minutes, so not a short little piece, but it's made of shorter little pieces that are arranged in like a big solo, which I really love. It's got that double-tracked guitar. It's also got like between the different changes, especially right before the solo, they have like these moments that are really cool where like they got a riff ending dun, 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 or something, and then a pause, and then like the drums come in, and these cool fills before it gets into the next thing, where it like really sort of paces it out in this cool way, which is something that happens a lot with Sabbath, which I love. It's the way they're able to, put these really cool changes into their songs. And we're going to see a whole lot more of that on Paranoid as well. Yeah, this is really sort of just a really long intro to Warning, which is one of my favorite songs on this album. So, I think maybe Evil Woman might have been a cover of a of a song, and I definitely I know for sure Warning is a cover. So let's get to Warning. So, Warning. So this is the let's just have a look. The 7th song on the album. Originally, this was the last track. We are going to get into Wicked World, which is the 8th bonus track in later releases. However, originally this was the ending song on the album. It is a 10-minute long bluesy, really dark epic, and it is awesome. I absolutely adore this song. This is, like I said, a cover song, but I listened to the original. It's actually a really good song, but this is a classic example of a song being covered and like taken to new levels by a different band. The only other cover that I think is better than the original that really beats this one would be All Along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix, which is a cover of Bob Dylan. But Warning, I forget who the original band was that wrote this. But if you search up, if you look it up, you'll be able to find it, and it's well worth listening to that original song as well. However, this isn't just a cover. In fact, I think the original version of this was actually a pretty short song, but like I said, this is 10 minutes long. Aside from just being a cover, this has its own sort of musical parts in it, and it has a very long, very awesome solo by Tony Iommi. So most of this, like a good chunk of it, like maybe a third, is just Tony playing playing on his own, and it's really well done. There's a lot of different vibes and sounds in there, and it sounds really cool. They like, especially in some of the really bluesy bits, like a lot of it isn't like overtly bluesy, but it's sort of like just dark sounding and like very sort of Black Sabbathy as well. But there's some really bluesy bits, and in those sort of bits, they have like a really cool effect going where that I've kind of tried to use here and there, where if it's just the guitar on its own, it's sort of panned mostly to one side, almost entirely, and it has just reverb on the other side. So you get this really sort of spacious effect, which this album has a sort of less sort of full thick sound than some of the future Black Sabbath albums. It's definitely not like 13, which I think is a little over compressed, but so it's got sort of a more sort of that sort of 1960s 70s type sound to it, which I love. But it still sounds really full in a lot of areas, but then it sounds really spacious in others, so a very dynamic sound. Again, Tony Iommi's just, all the different sounds he's able to get out of his guitar is awesome. He is one of my favorite guitar players ever, and probably my favorite one actually, so a song like this is really cool. The actual cover parts of the song are done super well. Ozzy sings them really really well. I think it's one of his strongest performances on this album. It's don't know how to describe it. It's just a very sort of dark sort of song, but very sort of it has the vibe of sort of the whole album on it, I'd say. This song sort of captures that. And yeah, it's just a really cool epic, really well done. So I love Warning. And like I said, this would have been the ending track to the entire album, which is kind of fitting because like it does have that sort of that same build up with that solo, and then it just like gets into that last sort of reprise of the sort of intro cover part. um, from the first part of the song Warning, and then it comes back at the end, and it has like this sort of really climactic sort of feel to the end. It's like, whoa, this is the ending. But since I do have this version, and it does have the track number 8. Let's just say that, Wicked World. So. Whoa. So, Wicked World, the last track on our album for today. And I'm really shocked this one was not on the original release, because this is such a good track. It's out of all of the tracks on this album, I'd say Wicked World is by far the one that that is the most sort of classic sort of Black Sabbath. It has all the hallmarks of the tracks on later albums, from especially like on Paranoid. This track would slot in perfectly on Paranoid. Maybe the production on this one feels... This one has, the production of this album, but the actual songwriting is very much so of Paranoid, where it's got like just that riff to it, and like it's got Ozzy singing in his higher pitched vocals, and lyrically it fits right in there with Paranoid, with War Pigs and those sort of songs. And I'm very shocked it was not on that like on this album. So I guess it might have been a B-side or something. But it's a very, very good song. It kicks off with a very jazzy themed sort of motif. You can really hear that sort of bluesy, jazzy influence that they had when they were, Earth. And I love the drums in that intro, and the guitars too. It feels kind of really James Bondy as well, and it kind of comes back in a bit later in the song. But then it has those moments again where the music backs off and the drums kick in, and then a riff comes in, and then the song really kicks off, and Ozzy starts, his voice soaring on top of that, and the bass is sort of plonking away in its really cool sort of jazzy way that Giza does. And it's very sort of Paranoid era Black Sabbath-y stuff. It actually, the riff in this gives me vibes of like Blue Cheer, which was, they're also cited as one of the early heavy metal, heavy rock sort of influential bands. So this one kind of has that sort of a feel, but that might be more production-wise and less with the songwriting, but still just a teeny bit there. But it's a great solo in this one as well. Yeah, I love the lyrics in this. Like, again, it's got those typical Geezer Butler sort of lyrics. Like, there's this really poignant line about they can put a man on the moon quite easy, but the people here on Earth are dying of all diseases, or something like that. And it's got those sort of classic Sabbath vibes to it. And yeah, so I adore Wicked World, and it's a shame that it was not on the original release. I know, like, you only have a limit of like 40 to 45 minutes, I think, at most, on a vinyl record back in the day with both sides. However, I wish they would have squeezed this one on somehow. So, with all the songs, we've kind of gone through the album track by track. Let's talk about it as a whole. So, as a whole, this album has its own unique sound, different from pretty much any other Black Sabbath album. I mean, there are future albums that have their own sound, like Technical Ecstasy, and especially Never Say Die, which are very sort of polarizing albums. I'm not even going to get to those like weird ones that came out like during the 80s and after Dio left. I'll probably review Born Again, but I don't know if I'm going to review the what do you call it? I don't know, like the Headless Cross era type albums, but definitely the Dio era and stuff like that. But I'll see it. We'll see. But so I'm not talking about those at the moment. I'm just talking about like core Black Sabbath sort of sound, like Ozzy Black Sabbath. So these are very different sounding. Just the entire vibe of the album. It's very dark, all of it. Even the really uplifting stuff like The Wizard. That's such a happy song, but then it has this really dark riff, like this guitar that sounds really aggressive when that riff comes in. So you got stuff like that. Like The Warning is like, just from the first couple of notes in it with the bass, It's really dark and just moody feeling, and it just works so well for the band. And that's not even talking about the song Black Sabbath, which the the whole main riff of it is beyond dark. But they do, they do have a lot of dynamics in here, because like I said, on the Wizard they have that harmonica, really happy vibe things. N.I.B is really bouncy, but lyrically it's pretty dark when you think about it being the devil and kind of like seducing this woman and like all that stuff. And Sleeping Village sounds really creepy, that sort of intro, but again it's got the dynamics of the sort of acoustic intro with that weird sounding stuff going on, and then it, like, changes, like so many changes. Black Sabbath have like the best sort of changes between rhythm and riffs, and it just drum fills are super on point here. Like pretty much everyone is really doing their thing really well. You could tell that they did rehearse this album. They did play it live so much they refined it really well. So they knew what they were doing. That's why they were able to kick this out so quickly and have such a good sounding album. I think that also lends to why it doesn't sound overproduced at all. It sounds very sort of spontaneous, and it's just like you just follow it along really organically that way. And but I can tell that some fans this may not be like up there in their top albums, because it does have a very unique feel, and I understand that. But for me, I absolutely love this album. Fantastic album. I really wish Wicked World was on the original release too. I'd be hard pressed to know which track, like if we had to fit it on, how could we fit it in, because all the tracks are so good. Black Sabbath is so good. The Wizard, I love The Wizard. Behind the Walls of Sleep is so good. N.I.B, you have to have N.I.B up there. Evil Woman, oh, I love Evil Woman. Maybe Wicked World could have replaced Evil Woman, but then I'd be probably saying the same thing about Evil Woman, that why isn't it on here? Sleeping Village, maybe we could have replaced it with that one, but it's just... But maybe, I guess, if I had to be pushed, I would have replaced Sleeping Village with Wicked World, but Sleeping Village just complements The Warning so nicely, and I love The Warning, so I absolutely love this whole album. I'm gonna give it, what am I gonna, I'm thinking what kind of a system I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do it out of 10 or 5. Okay, I'll do it out of 5. So I'm gonna give this 5 oh yes out of 5. So 1970s Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath is getting 5 oh yes out of 5. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Don't worry, I'll have more guitar and bass related stuff soon. We're probably gonna be hopefully I can get onto that soon. But again, I am having a lot of trouble with my internet connection to upload these videos, and find time to actually make them as well is a bit of an issue too. But I will get there. So if I don't get these videos out on time, I will get them out eventually. So thanks for bearing with me. So next time in our album reviews, we're going to be taking a look at the monster of an album that is Paranoid. Absolutely awesome little album here, which I'm really excited to talk about with you guys, and I'm sure you guys know this album front and back, so it's gonna be very fun with this one. Actually, just before we close off this album, I will note I love the cover of this album as well. It's something I forgot to talk about earlier. Let's just take it out of here. We can see they got this cool little release here, and let's take a look at the inside here. So I'm not reviewing like the specific releases of the album, just the sort of broader release in general with these. So if I get like a weird special edition CD, I may review the tracks on that special edition, but it's not that I'm reviewing like the specific edition. So this album's always had this cover, I think. So you got that really cool Black Sabbath font, which I love. Black Sabbath, I love a lot of their album covers. They're really well done, and this one's really classic. Like it's perfectly fits the tone of the music on this album. I think it's got that sort of really creepy British countryside sort of look, and this like creepy person here. I don't know, a lot of people, I think it's probably some random woman or something, or like I don't know, it could be Ozzy Osbourne even, or who knows. I don't think anyone really knows who that was, but it just this really creepy looking cover, and it fits with that sort of somber sort of theme of the whole album. So there we go, and they got that same sort of figure, I think, on the Sabracadabra pedal, which I'm going to be reviewing very soon, which is a guitar pedal that is supposed to give you like that. It's matched. It's made to sound like a modified Rangemaster treble boost pedal going into the preamp of a Laney supergroup, which is basically pretty close to the sound that Tony Iommi was sort of using on his early albums. So I've tried that pedal out. It's pretty fun. So I'm going to be reviewing that for you guys as soon as I can. But yeah, thanks so much for checking out this video. Oh, and don't forget, in the comments below, actually, let me know what are your thoughts about this album and like any other albums you want me to review in the future. And yeah, so without further ado, peace out.